All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the COBOL Programming Course Q4 webinar. I'm pleased to have Reinhardt from Talladega College join us today to share his experience learning COBOL. I'm also going to touch on a new release of the COBOL Programming Course and share with you how you can get started and access that content towards the end of today's webinar. So with that, welcome, Reinhardt. Would you like to take a few moments to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Michael. I'm Reinhard Mensah, a computer science senior at Talladega College with passions in programming languages and soccer. Um, I'm an international student from Ghana as well, so I do have an accent. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, could you jump in and talk about, what brought you to COBOL, why you were interested in learning the language?
So I was introduced to COBOL by my professor, Mr. Grabowski. Prior to that, I hadn't heard of COBOL, Mainframe, nothing. All I knew was um, the basic computer languages everyone knows. So it was in the programming languages classes, and the class was supposed to introduce you to different programming languages, and doesn't really go deep into the languages itself. It just touches on the surface, and then kind of. So there was Fortran in there, there was COBOL, there was Python, Java, there was all that. But then my professor decided that since first year you are introduced to Python, Java, C, and all that, we should take a different route. And then I think there's that freedom for the teacher to choose the language to teach in that class. So he decided to do COBOL just a little bit, so we go on to something else. And then unfortunately for us, which now that I look back, I kind of think fortunately, um, uh, instruments we had for other languages didn't really work out. So he decided to continue with COBOL, and that's what got me interested into it.
Okay, you mentioned you touched on the basics before jumping into COBOL. Could you talk about, what those basics were, what programming languages or tools you may have been familiar with before learning COBOL?
So before learning COBOL, I was used to using your PyCharm, VS Code, MATLAB. Those were like things I knew about kind of as a basic CS student. And then VS Code, I don't know if I already said that. But then I didn't know about mainframe. I didn't know about oh, all the legacy sorry codes stuff. So it was kind of a new experience getting to know, like, you think you know all that you have to know in terms of languages and all, but then there's this that is like actually powerful, and has a whole lot of community that people actually there. You don't even know anything about it. So that was really kind of surprising that you wouldn't know much about it, but I was glad I got introduced to it.
Okay, very, very cool. So in VS Code, was your development language there maybe along the lines of did some JavaScript development, anything like that, or Python development?
It was mainly Python. To be honest, until probably I would say the ECC conference, because after we got introduced to it, he was like, "Oh, there's this conference," and kind of it was like me because it was me and Victor actually, because we had to do a project in the class on COBOL, and then it's like we're the two that kind of took like a big interest in it. So that's why. And then during at the ACC conference, I did meet a lot of people, interacted, and I realized, I mean, I'm a CS student, but I don't think I'm really doing much. I'm just like, okay, I know my stuff, but then I'm not really doing much to show for it. So then one thing I realized was the COBOL program, like every other education stuff you have on COBOL, actually puts you into like trying your hands on stuff, submitting a job, like all those, which kind of is most programming language you don't have that, because it's just like, oh, just code your line, output and you say, but then this was like, even though in actual terms, that's how it's like you're doing when you're submitting a job and all, but then it kind of takes like that extra, you have to understand the JC offer, you have to do this. So it's kind of more, I don't know how to put it, but it kind of requires you to know more, which I'm always curious to know more. So that was really good for me.
Okay. Yeah, very, very cool. So you touched on, you had prior experience with VS Code, prior experience with PyCharm. You were comparing and contrasting your experience with COBOL to your other languages in those spaces. I think one good point you touched on is JCL. I think that trips up a lot of folks when they're moving to mainframe, that, hey, there's these jobs you gotta submit to run your applications on these shared systems. So that's good to call out as sort of a difference with our platform. But could you talk about some similarities in learning COBOL through your course? Did you use these development environments you were already familiar with? Did you use Visual Studio Code when you were learning COBOL?
So yeah, we used VS Code. We did try. I'm trying to see if I know the name, but then I think it was calling it the mainframe. I don't know if that was the name, but like it was the one with the green letters and the numbers at the side and all that. Because my teacher was talking about when he was doing the master the mainframe contest. That's what you're supposed to use, and that looked a little scary, not to lie. Because it was like, the like old numbers here, like, stuff, and I'm not used to that. But then in VS Code, it was kind of like simple, simplified. It's like, or right click, submit job, and all that. So that was kind of really interesting. But at a point as I went on, I really wanted to, because I remember there was a time I went to my teacher and I'm like, yeah, I know we had this project and we had to do it in VS Code, but can we try doing it on the, I think we had the TN3270. Yeah. And then I was like, can we try doing it on there? And then, because he was like, one good thing I do like is he allows me to explore. So he was like, well, I don't remember much. I'll try to see if I get some documentation on it for you to read. But then this is it. We have like license to it. So go try your hands on it. I did play around with it sometimes too much that I had to kind of start my whole session and all. But I because I actually do like the whole visual presentation, the green, the blue, and then it's like, oh, you can move your toolbar from down here to up here. You can do all this cool stuff on there, and it was really eye opening to say because I'd already used VS Code for other programming languages, and then in VS Code it doesn't really give you that bright, colorful, like like how you get it on this other stuff. So but VS Code with COBOL was also great because it was kind of really simple, basic stuff. Because we had the whole labs on it. You watch the video, you submit, you take the file, you take the exam. Was yeah.
Oh yeah, that's great to hear. And that's one of the things we're trying to address with the COBOL programming course, but also with really the open mainframe project in general. Look at solutions like Zoe, for example, to give folks options, right? For those who want to continue programming on 3270 interfaces, go ahead. That's perfectly, fine if you're familiar with that space. But you also see folks wanting to take advantage of these other tools that maybe they're familiar with, or tools that they can think can enhance their productivity and apply them to mainframe. I'm just thinking back to when I started on the platform in 2015. There really wasn't a lot of choice there. You logged into 3270 and you started your development, and really a big aspect of Zoe and how it came about was the team that originally built the CLI. They wanted to use test automation and apply it to mainframe. And so they built this command line interface into the mainframe and then leveraged some, modern testing tools like Mocha, for example. Now we use Jest internally, but just different testing frameworks you could apply. And we're also seeing that evolution in the course. One thing we'll touch on later is, we're trying to get a course out on unit testing and how you can use COBOL check, which is yet another project underneath Open Mainframe project, to do your COBOL unit testing. It's really cool. I really enjoy hearing that you explored both areas. I think it's important to continue to be familiar with both areas, but then just use the tools you feel make you the most productive and make the most sense. One thing I like that Sudharsana typically says is, a goal of these courses is to add COBOL to your tech toolkit. I think all these things to add to your tech toolkit are great. 3270 experience, ISPF experience, VS Code experience. It's just it really helps position yourself to do well when you really begin your career. So I guess I hear that you also made a game in your course. Could you talk a little bit about the game you made based on COBOL?
Yeah, so to be, to start off, the game itself was a general project for the class, and it's it's a small class, so we're like probably like 6 people in the class, including Victor and myself. And then so we started I did skip class one day because that was when they decided to who is who in the group. So like, what is the code? Is that this is the person who does this? And I wasn't around, so they decided to make me the one that writes the code and all that. And then they all come up with the idea. But then my professor did have an idea based on the movie War Games. When the guy logs onto the system and asks him, "Good day, Professor, something. Would you like to play a game?" And so he had the idea based on that. I was like, "Yeah, let's see if we could do that in COBOL and try to see if it will work." And then let's see. So it was like a challenge thrown, and I did like it. And the funny part was my pseudocode was actually in Python because that was like the language I was most confident in. So I wrote my pseudocode in Python, trying to be smart. So that I'm like, oh, I have the pseudocode here. Someone else should do it in COBOL because I didn't. But then I was doing the challenge because I realized it's been like 2 weeks now, and we have to submit the first of our midterm, and I need the grade because I'm about to graduate, so I need to like make sure. And everyone was just like, I don't know what you're doing, so I had to like go out myself, be I was googling stuff, I was finding stuff. And then one quick thing was I was always coming back to my teacher like, oh, this is what I found. Do you think this would work? Should we try it this way? And then we kept doing it. Then Victor came and it's like, so Victor, the different things about Victor and I is that Victor is the one that has like the whole idea, like can actually explain it all to you. I'm more of like, tell me what to do and I'll write it. That's how it became because I was like, how do we want to? It was like, oh, we want it to be like countries on there. So I went on and forgot to talk about the game itself. So it's kind of like a cyber war, not another war game. So one, you pick a country or a city, and then you attack a different country or a city based on how the game goes. And then initially it was plain simple. It was just if you pick a smaller country and go against the bigger country that's known with their cyber, prowess, you lose. So it was kind of easy for someone to easily be like, okay, I picked this country, or your cyber integrity has been compromised. It was kind of something basic. But then as we went on, I was like, started thinking about like, why not find a way to randomize this? And surprisingly, there's stuff on there like out there like can actually help you with it. So basically I was thinking of like because I still think, like the first language I felt very confident in was Python. So I normally think in Python and I'm like, okay, if this can be done in Python, can it be done in this language too? Which most of the time is true. So that's how the whole game came about. And I mean, I did end up doing most of the work with Victor, but then I don't really mind as long as you did get the grade. I was okay with it. And then it became like something we started working on gradually because we were going for the ECC conference. It's like, can you guys like, improve on this? Because, I'm going to give a presentation, I want to talk about it. And from there, it started, being like, okay, because now you meet people, like I know, I think I met Paul, met a few people, then they're like, oh, that's something good you guys are doing. I'm like, if people already in the industry think what you're doing is really good, why stop there, So I did come home and then ended up getting like a few badges here, and I'm still actually trying to get more as much as I could get because I don't know. Once you're done with one badge, it's like, oh, there's this other one that you can actually get. So I just keep going, and so maybe sometimes there's a phase where maybe a few weeks where you're kind of lazy and not trying to do anything, but then you come back again and try to get all that. So yeah, it's still personally, I think it's still a gaming process. I think it could still be better. As I go on and get more understanding of it, I feel like I could still do more with it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Sounds like you and Victor made a good team, and it sounds like it was a successful project. That it kind of, it's interesting how you went about that because, you know, I I think a lot of folks would do something similar. If you're learning a new language, you write the pseudocode in something that you understand. I also think it's kind of similar in a way to learning a foreign language when you're first getting started. Before you're fluent in that language, you sort of think in your native language and then try to convert it over. So that's a really interesting perspective. You mentioned for the most part, COBOL was sufficient, and when you went from Python into COBOL, um, what you needed was there. Was there anything you found that was harder to find I would say a COBOL equivalent versus a Python? One big thing just to help you think about it. One big difference I see between COBOL and some of these other languages is there's package registries. So for example, Python has a lot of open source software available to use on the Python index. But with COBOL, there's not an open source registry to share code that way. However, there are a lot of built-in macros that you can call, and sort of those built-in functions you can leverage help you most of the time get far enough quickly enough. But interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So just before I go there, I had to do a senior seminar last semester, and my seminar was actually on modernization of COBOL. So um, as I was going about it, I realized most of the time when I was before that, I was like trying to find because like I feel like personally, I think one problem is the documentation of like COBOL. There's not much. I mean, even if there is, it's harder to find than there is to find of these modern languages to say. So it's always like you have to go back to someone who's actually used it before, or you have to go ask. That's personally, that's how I did get it. So I was always going back to my professor because he had, had a little experience in the, maybe not a little, he did have experience in there. So I was going back to him all the time and asking him, even though he didn't really seem to recall much, he still had the basic idea of what it's supposed to be. So that was my main source of information. But whereas like with Python, you have all these, as you said, open sources where you could go get all the information you need. And I think one of my goals I talked about was like with the modernization, if we could actually do get like more documentation. So instead of just people who do know, there's actually like documentation for it where you can actually go and then so you could get it from someone who knows and then also read from somewhere and then combine the two, which would kind of deepen what you know about it more. So that was a little challenge I faced. I felt like I didn't really do get much documentation on it to actually read. I had to rely on experiences. So that was my little challenge with COBOL. But as with anything, there's a little challenge you face. So yeah.
So just to summarize, maybe one sort of difference in general learning COBOL versus other languages is when you're starting on learning those other languages, there's a lot of documentation available to help you get started. Maybe things on Stack Overflow to help you move along with your project. Whereas with COBOL today, outside of I'd say the Open Mainframe Project's COBOL programming course, there's not too much documentation out there, and a lot of it lives within the minds of experts who have been programming in COBOL for a long time on the mainframe. So the experience is sort of a little bit different in that, you really need to go ask folks to try to get their knowledge and learn from people. Since it's not, I'd say since the documentation isn't as prevalent, does that sort of encapsulate your point of view there?
Exactly, yeah. that was
Hmm.
it.
So as far as like next steps, like if you had guidance here, do you have any suggestions for your COBOL programming course? Anything that could be um, done better? I get the more documentation in the industry, but beyond that, do you have any insights?
I would think so. This is just me thinking because at the when I go back to the ECC conference, because I feel like that was like a really a big turning point for me. I realized it's like, the gap between those in the industry and whoever is coming in is, I mean, the age gap is really wide. And yeah, it's an issue, but I feel like personally, if there could be like more mentors, you know, so like maybe a program where there's more people, there's you can reach out and get mentors in like the mainframe industry to mentor you. Because I feel like once people get to know like there's this gap there, and then because most people I spoke to at the conference, what the most of them came out with like, job security. I'm like, I've been in this job, like I've been in this job for like 30 years or 40 years. And I'm like, that's like the job security right there. So and then if people are like, mentored into it, then it would people that actually do have like the interest for it, but then because like they face a little challenge in the beginning are able to be like, push through it, they give up. But then they have someone to hold their hands maybe through that initial phase, it would be great to, you know, sorry, I got a little distracted. It would be great for them coming into it, and then that would really help bridge the gap. And then we would have COBOL. I really do like COBOL in the mainframe, so I would love to see that.
That's a great suggestion. So just in regards to not necessarily maybe to a degree in mentorship, not mentorship exclusively on COBOL. Just one thing I'll note here for the audience and then also yourself, there is an open mainframe project mentorship program that folks can register towards. And actually, and within our project ourselves, we've had mentees become mentors, become TSC members. One example is Artanto on our project. He was a mentee 1 year and then mentor the next, and now he's a member of our technical steering committee. So that's an opportunity for mentoring, but that's sort of around open mainframe projects more so than COBOL. With regards to COBOL though, and I'm not sure if you are on our Slack channel. One thing, oh, you are? Okay. Well, one note to others in the audience is I think our Slack channel has to be just about the best place to meet others with a common goal of becoming more effective at COBOL programming. There's over 6,000 folks on there, and not necessarily everyone's engaged, and not necessarily every question gets answered. But that community is a great resource to at least throw out some questions and see if you can get them answered. And I also say, our COBOL programming course team is fairly small. And for us to be able to maintain the large amount of users trying to learn COBOL on these systems can be challenging. So just a shout out to anyone on that Slack channel who has helped others, because without that sort of community helping community, it's really not an achievable task for just a few folks to try to maintain the course and then also do the Slack bit. So I guess that's my thoughts on community and some of the aspects of the COBOL programming course that can help that. Our mission was really threefold here with the COBOL programming course. One was to enable learners to add COBOL to their tech toolkit through hands-on labs and real learning experience rather than just reading documentation. Two is to leverage modern tools like Visual Studio Code to entice the next generation to take a leap and take a look at this important programming language and this important platform that is the mainframe. And then third was to build a community of learners, build a platform that we can talk about some of the challenges we're facing and bounce ideas around. I've seen some success outside the COBOL programming course in this area too, just to mention, like in the mainframe space in general. Not just even in open mainframe projects, like Zoe has a great community as well. But I've also seen folks post questions in Slack now, or not Slack, Stack Overflow. about mainframe programming and get them answered. And then there's industry events, of course, too. So Share is a great one for a mainframe conference if anyone has the opportunity, and you meet some of those folks. I actually met a person one time at Share who answered someone's question that I knew on Stack Overflow, and I was like, oh wow, such a small world. All the mainframers working together. So I'm thinking about where to go next. I guess I'm interested in, you had some programming experience, you learned COBOL, and what's next? What's the next big thing you're interested in adding to your tech toolkit?
I think but now basically I'm looking into more like the assembly regs. That's because I did meet a few people that were like, you do have an understanding of this, but then you can add these to your skill sets, and that would actually help you stand out. As I'm like getting close to graduation, which is in May, I need to start setting myself up for to be placed somewhere good. And I say this because until probably being introduced to COBOL, I was kind of lost where I actually do want to go. Because if you're a computer science student, as most people know, it's like, yeah, you could go anywhere, but then also you could be like a jack of all trades but master of none. And like, so I took it upon myself. I mean, I did see the mainframe COBOLs. I feel like I really want to be in this field. And then ever since then, I'll say I speak to people and they're like, oh, this is the two reactions you get all the time when you like I tell people like, oh, I'm learning COBOL, I'm trying to, get to know more about the mainframe. They're like, either you get, oh, that's really good. There's not much, young people going into that field now. So you should actually look into it. Or you get the isn't that like an old language? Who uses that anymore? And then now me who is seeking information ends up being the one seeking information. Like, I mean, it's still being used, they are still being used, and actually very important. So I would say my next step is to actually like look more into the open mainframe project, learn more. Because I know I did meet I'm scratching my head, I'm trying to remember his name. He was on my panel for the IBM CBA. Yeah, I think he was a mentee of the program too. So,
He's talking about Ashish, Mike.
Yes,
Oh,
actually,
sheesh. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And what I realized was because he was exposed to the open, he did have a better understanding than I did because like he has seen documentations and like been mentored and like knows that. So I think my next step is to actually take a closer look at the open mainframe project and then learn from there as well.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that also provides some guidance to us. We're in the COBOL programming course. We've been trying to drive that forward with more education around COBOL and different subsystems of relevance. So one thing I'll talk about is like next for the course, we're looking at including more CICS content with which Kix is really the transaction powerhouse of the mainframe, very important for and critical aspect of the mainframe for why it continues to be very successful and prevalent today. But that's sort of been our focus, like within the COBOL programming course itself. But I think the next steps for the open mainframe project more broadly is to include educational content on things like Rex, high level assembler, etc. So I think that's important, and maybe we can try to help fill that gap somewhat from a COBOL programming course perspective. Maybe we can expand. I know there's another initiative called Open Mainframe Project Education, which is a little bit more general. Maybe we can also contribute there. We do have some JCL at in the course, not a ton, but enough to help you work with COBOL. But we could definitely add some pieces of Rex, high level assembler. I don't think there's too much in terms of that education available in the project. So those are all good points. I think I'll pause here. Sudharsana, Paul, do you have any additional questions you want to ask?
I don't have an additional question, but I will say Reinhardt has already demonstrated to me he's got expert leadership skills. And let me tell you why I say that. Reinhardt mentioned his class teammates didn't know what to do at some point. So Reinhardt started brainstorming in search of what can be done. That's a sign of a go-to expert. So I thought that comment was excellent from Reinhardt.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you, both Mike and Reinhard. I know I couldn't do much speaking today, so thanks, Mike and Reinhard. So wonderful to hear from you. And good luck with, whatever the journey holds. And I heard you say you want to stay on Mainframe and learn more about COBOL, so go Reinhard.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for sharing your experience with our attendees today. It's great to hear from others onboarding onto the platform. And then yeah, that's great. That's a leadership quality as well, being able to not just learn something, but share what you've learned with the broader community and help inspire others and things of that nature. So definitely appreciate you taking the time with us today. Do you have any final things you want to mention before I jump into the next release of the course?
No, I think because you did mention the CICS, I think Interskill do have a course on that as well. So just throwing it out there, but yeah, that's it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. There's lots of great courses on Interskill as well for folks learning this space, and if folks want to check those out and learn more there, that's great as well. I think there are a few high-level assembler courses over there as well. But maybe folks contributing into that landscape also, we could collaborate in the open community as well and build some of this out together. But Interskill is a great course, great asset, great resource for additional learning. So thanks for mentioning that. I just want to jump really quickly now. Oh, and the last thing I want to mention is I think Reinhardt's in his senior year and he's looking for opportunities. So if you also need folks to help work on mainframe systems, critical mainframe systems, feel free to reach out to Reinhardt or myself, and I can get you in contact with Reinhardt. So thank you. Let me jump over to the project really quick. So I'll share my screen. Screen 2. All right. All right, so you should be seeing our GitHub page. I just want to announce quickly that we have released a new version of the course just this morning. So this is fresh off the press, so to speak, but version 3.1. I'd like to credit our mentee, Ashish, for driving this release forward. And also, this release was done in partnership with another open mainframe project called COBOL Check to add testing into the course content. So if we look at all releases here, I just want to call out a major difference you'll see here between 3.0 and 3.1. And that's that there's another asset here. So here we have 6, here we have 7. That new asset is this testing course. So how you would get started with this is you could just click on this PDF, you would download it locally, and this is what the course will look like for you. So there's 3 key sections. One, overviewing the importance of testing, essentially, and giving you some basics about testing and testing on the mainframe on ZOS. And then there's a section on COBOL Check, getting started with it, how to leverage it. And then finally, through some hands-on lab, you'll implement some unit tests for a COBOL program. So it's a great start to this course. We're also interested in what you want to hear about testing. So if you have additional requirements or enhancements you'd like to see to our course, we're listening. So if you go to our issues tab here, you can open up enhancement requests. So for example, here was one that was open to include more information about COBOL and Java programs working together. So that's another item on our backlog. And then finally, I just want to highlight here we've had a lot of interest in our course, with over 2,000 stars, over 500 forks, and then of course our community of learners on Slack. If you haven't yet joined our Slack community, you can also do that from the GitHub page. You can just run down here and click reach out on our Slack channel and sign up, and there will be, you know, really a broader community of learners and COBOL enthusiasts to help you with any problems you encounter. So I think that's oh, one other thing I wanted to just quickly mention as an enhancement is we also included the results of a COBOL working group survey. So the COBOL working group is another project underneath the Open Mainframe project, and we included the results of that survey in our course as well. I think that's all I have. Any final thoughts from anyone before we close out our Q4 webinar? All right, thanks all. Thanks again, Reinhardt, and happy holidays to everyone, and maybe squeeze in a little bit of time to try out the testing course.
Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.